Hello everyone, welcome back to HS English. Today we'll be looking at another character, Candy today, from Of Mice and Men. And once again, let's go straight through it. And the essay plan has been prepared right here. So, without further ado, the first paragraph of Candy is clearly going to be his relationship between himself and his dog, a set of symbolism portrayed by Steinbeck. Because, as we've seen by the novel, Candy is vulnerable and he's almost victimized by society due to his elder nature, his lack of an arm, and he's very lonely, and the only real kind of friend that he has is his dog. And this can be seen how he's had it since he was a pup, he was the best damn sheepdog I've ever seen. Sorry there. And basically it shows Candy speaking grandly of his younger days, something that you can refer to. But as the novel goes on, another farm worker, Carlson, is always pushing for Candy's dog to be shot. But Candy continues to protest that I had him so long, as I wrote here. But the protest is sadly unheard of, and Candy's dog is eventually shot, and Candy's face turns to the wall. And it almost just shows how the views of the elderly and the kind of respect towards them at the time of the Great Depression was just completely unheard of. That they had no rights, and it almost just symbolizes the treatment received by the elderly. That, as I've wrote in this final paragraph here, that once they had no use for society, they couldn't survive unless they were cared by their families. And you can then link this into your AO4 historical context by showing the fact that, with the hardships of the Great Depression, even their families couldn't sustain elderly people, and hence they were forced to work, just to find some source of income to survive, because there was no source of state pension until the Social Security Act of 1935. And also another bit here is the relationship almost between Candy and Candy's dog is almost like a sense of foreshadowing. It's almost like has similarities to the relationship between George and Lenny, because as I've talked earlier, Lenny also is portrayed with lots of animalistic features. Actually, I can have a look here. You see here, Lenny, for example, is being described as dragging his paws, but he's like a lamb. And this kind of animalistic nature of Lenny can almost tie himself between the relation with Candy and Candy's dog, because the dog is almost representing Lenny, and Candy is almost like George being in control. And therefore, the way that Lenny's shot in the end and the failure of that relationship can come from how Candy's dog was also shot. Therefore, Candy's dog really gets that sense of, and the kind of relationship is basically foreboding to the demise of George and Lenny's relationship. Moving on for paragraph 2, Candy feels victimized and useless in society will be the theme of this one. Continuing on, instead of not as much as the relationship with the dog, but looking at Candy himself, he feels himself lonely and useless, as the quote says here, "When they can me here, I wish somebody shoot me. I won't have no place to go, and I can't get no more jobs." Because he understands that he will receive no aid if he gets canned, which basically means to get fired, due to his isolation, disability, and old age. And similarly, Candy just has no bonds. There's no one to help him. The dog was the only person who he could had a friend within. And therefore, when Candy's dog is shot, Candy looks for help from face to face, but clearly he's completely helpless, and it just shows his desperation. And therefore, it just portrays the nature of the itinerant farm worker. That they, for example, from Carlson's perspective of shooting the dog, there was no emotional kind of aspect towards the job, because they'd been hardened and toughened by the harshness of the Great Depression, the need to survive. They're migrant workers, remember, working from farm to farm. Hence, they don't feel any need to establish relationships. There's a continuous risk of being redundant. And therefore, this can be seen with Candy and his failure to really make a bond with any of the farmers, and his failures to get any aid when Carlson's about to shoot his dog. And you can, if you want to connote, you can also look at some other aspects you want to build, kind of the lack of relationship within this Candy essay. Is you can look at that Whit and Bill Tanner short relationship, or even how George states he could maybe have a girl. But you can do this, through the eyes of Candy. This is quite nice actually. You can just link a few more characters again in an essay plan with Candy by showing the loneliness of Candy. It doesn't just apply to Candy. It just shows the nature of the itinerant farm worker. And then finally, if you look now specifically Candy's dog. So what we've done in the first paragraph, we looked at Candy and his dog. In the second paragraph, we've just at Candy, and now we're looking at Candy's dog. So what we see with Candy's dog is almost seen as Candy himself. He's almost like a replica. He's almost foreshadowing what would happen to Candy if he lost his job, and you can see almost like a metaphor what would happen to Candy if he got canned. And the kind of latter description of Candy's dog, almost then at its heels there walked a dragfoot sheepdog, grey of muzzle with pale blind old eyes. It almost shows through Candy's dog, Steinbeck basically shown through Candy's dog, the life the old and vulnerable had to face, because ever since Candy's dog lost his position as sheepdog, he lost his worth on the farm, he lost his purpose, and without a purpose, no farm worker would wish to keep him, apart from Candy, and hence he was eventually gotten rid of by Carlson. And moving on a little bit more, if you want to look at Candy as well, you can look at the description, continuing on kind of like the disability and the elderly theme, is that he's a tall, stoop-shouldered old man, but because he's lost his right hand in a farming accident, he has a stick-like wrist. And this kind of old and disabled aspect, you can again portray that historical context. You know, there's no pension; they have to continue working in order to sustain themselves. And Curly's wife calls Candy a lousy old sheep. He and Candy worries about being put on the county, and they're basically having nowhere to live if he gets canned, and that's his biggest fear. And that's why Candy's really wishing to join George and Lenny's plan in their American dream to build a farm and to basically find a safe place, you know, where Candy doesn't feel like he's going to be canned. But one sad dark side with Candy, he's also kind of racially prejudiced. Like, he tells George about how Crooks was gone to a bunkhouse and eventually beaten by another ranch worker. But Candy crucially paused in relish of the memory, almost like he enjoyed that moment. But nevertheless, I think the key thing with Candy is to, and with at least the historical context of Candy, is to show the lack of care towards the elderly, the lack of care towards the disabled, because until 1935 there was no system of state pension or help towards the disabled in America. Thank you. Please feel free, and that's all I've got, sorry, today. And feel free, I plan to do some more characters, Curly's wife, Slim, Curly. So yeah, continue to like and subscribe, and we'll hopefully build it from here. Thank you.